In 2018, the NITI Aayog was tasked with designing a blueprint for mainstreaming AI in India with the objective of AI for all. The government think tank identified half a dozen sectors where AI could make a meaningful difference to bridge the access deficit and raise the quality of delivery. From healthcare to education, agriculture to smart mobility, the government hopes that an AI-driven future will help unlock economic potential and aid growth. Accenture believes AI could boost India's annual growth rate by 1.3 percentage points by 2035. Prime Minister Modi, in his inaugural remarks at the Race 2020, has reiterated the need to push the AI agenda and promised to make India the global hub for AI. But many barriers remain, from a robust privacy framework to the absence of a collaborative ecosystem. To talk about how India can make this goal a reality, joining me on the show are the CEO of NITI Aayog, Amitabh Kant, and Marcus Wallenberg, the chair of SEB, a European financial group. Marcus also sits on the boards of Saab, AstraZeneca, and many other companies, and has been a long-time India watcher. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining me here on the program. Mr. Kant, let me start by asking you, as I pointed out, NITI Aayog was tasked with designing the blueprint. You put out a discussion paper in 2018 identifying sectors where AI will prove to be beneficial and identifying barriers that needed correction. We're here in 2020. The Prime Minister has talked about making India a global hub for AI. How do we get there?
So Shereen, firstly, I think data really lies at the core of all development of AI technologies. India's digital footprint is one of its biggest strengths. We have a very high penetration of internet users, almost 600 million users. These are going to substantially rise with access to cheap data. The data costs are the lowest in the world in India. India's cashless transactions have gone up enormously. We've seen a five-fold increase in smartphone penetration during the last 3 years. And I think the real digitization effort has been through Aadhaar, the biometric which every Indian has, unified payment interface, which is the seamless transaction which banks do, the goods and services tax, which is totally digital. And, in government, every transaction is digital in India now. So the public digital infrastructure has created an opportunity for artificial intelligence to be leveraged. And this would really, the challenge here is really to clean up data, annotate data, and enhance computing power, which is now being done through the National Knowledge Network. So with this, I think we should use AI in a lot of social areas of education, health, agriculture, because we are also a very diverse country, home to more than 2,000 ethnic groups, a lot of languages, and therefore all these things are to a huge advantage to India to drive AI.
No, they are to India's advantage, but you talked about data being the natural resource, a national asset. And let me ask you about the cornerstone really of creating a robust AI ecosystem is to have a robust privacy framework in place. We still don't have that legislation being passed. Moreover, we also have different government arms, different government bodies, different government agencies collecting data from individuals, putting it to different use. So is there a way of streamlining that process? And by when do we expect to actually have a robust privacy framework in place?
So Shereen, you're aware about it, that we've gone about it very transparently. We'd constituted a committee with Justice Sri Krishna as its chairman, which did a lot of homework. It's made its recommendation. The government consulted all the stakeholders. It has come out with a data privacy and data security law that has gone to the parliament for approval. It is being subjected to parliamentary approval, and I think we should soon have a data privacy law.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. We have been waiting for that to happen. Marcus Wallenberg, as I pointed out, you've been a long-time India watcher as part of your roles in many capacities, and of course, as part of the Joint Business Roundtable as well. What do you believe are the potential areas of future collaboration, partnership, especially between Sweden and India, when it comes to the area of AI?
Well, Shereen, thanks for having me today. Yes, I'm a keen India observer indeed. So I think there are a number of collaboration opportunities. We have identified that through the joint business council that have developed over the years, and in fact, a couple of the work streams there are actually designed and geared towards the whole digital side, including possibilities, I would think, in AI going forward. It comes a little bit, perhaps I should take a little bit step back, because talking about what kind of experience do we have on our side in this field. We don't see ourselves as leaders in this field. However, we have come to the conclusion that over the years, the best way for us is to build on a specific way of handling development within industries that is very peculiar for Sweden, in the sense that we try to find ways how to collaborate between business, government, and academia.
Right.
And this is something which we, to a large extent, also have taken back into the question of AI. So about 5-6 years ago, we, on part of the Wallenberg foundations, but also in discussions with the government and business, we came to the conclusion that unless we put significant support behind the AI development going forward, we would probably be overrun. And you have to remember that Sweden is a very small country compared to India. I mean, we're 10 million people here, so we are very much forced to collaborate. And since we are so export dependent as a nation, to stay innovative and stay competitive, we really have to work together to get new stuff going. So anyway, 5-6 years ago, this discussion was going on. We very early identified the need for going much more digital, and we started something, a project with a number of universities here in Sweden around the notion around autonomous systems, because we saw that was the first step moving in there. But soon the discussion moved into AI, because these two technologies will go on and work together. And of course, this is the whole question around big data. And you've been touching with Amitabh and also on your question regarding all the different questions around big data. How do you clean up your data? What kind of data are you allowed to use? Which is a huge question in Europe right now. And we moved into creating a project, a 10-year plus project around AI with the largest universities in Sweden. And for the first time, also getting businesses to join. Okay. So, and government to a certain extent. So we actually now have a collaboration in the whole AI field between academia, the business sector, and the government in trying to find avenues forward and really developing big and broad knowledge base in this area. Mm-hmm. This is how we have gone about it.
Okay, so that's interesting. You're talking about that link between industry, government, and academia, creating that collaborative ecosystem. But if I may just ask you a question in the context of what we're seeing happen globally. In fact, yesterday at the Raise 2020 Summit, Mukesh Ambani, the chairman of Reliance Industries, brought up this issue about digital capital. And he said in the coming decades, nations will increasingly compete on digital capital. Now, that is an opportunity as well as a challenge. How do you believe, what is the way to navigate through these data wars?
I think that, of course, this is a very important point. And if you live in a country with 1.3 billion people, obviously you have substantial more data than if you live in a country with 10 million people. I think he's right. I think we've seen the way the US big corporations in this whole space, how they push the technologies. I think that if you look into the Chinese marketplace, they have also used the AI technologies and the really advanced algorithms to push a lot of their businesses. I expect that this will come to India as well. I hope that Europe will pick up pace both in the AI digital side, but also in the whole 5G technology, because the 5G technology side will be an integral part on how to develop AI going forward. Because the sheer data flow that will come through the 5G system will absolutely be one of the key aspects to it for industry, for consumers, for a number of different industries. So I would very much agree with Mr. Ambani's suggestion there.
Well, I'll talk to you about 5G and the use cases linked to that in just a second, but let me get Mr. Kant to comment on that. Mr. Kant, what is the government's position? How is the government intending to navigate what we are likely to see is an era of data wars? We've already seen this play out with the recent example of TikTok, for instance, in India. We've moved toward data localization norms and so on and so forth. But what next? What is the viewpoint? How is the government gearing up or preparing for this? You've got the Indian startup ecosystem today seeking an Atmanirbhar digital plan, talking about an India app store to take on the likes of Google. What's the government's position on all of this?
Yeah, but Shereen, let me first tell you that Atmanirbhar Bharat is not anti-globalization in any way. In fact, Atmanirbhar Bharat is about using the domestic market, using its strength to become a major player in the global market, and how India can become an integral part of the global supply chain. It's not protectionism by any manner and by any standard. And our objective is very clear that it's not possible for Indian companies to become leaders without using the strength of the domestic market to get into export. No country in the world has ever grown without exports, and Indian companies must export in a very big way. And that's what Atmanirbhar Bharat is all about. And even startups, even Indian startups must look at the world, must look at global markets. They can't grow on the back of only the domestic market, and therefore they must learn to think big and penetrate global markets. And this is important. And it's important also to realize that the export markets give you almost 4x, 5x of what the domestic market will give you, and therefore it's necessary to get into these supply chains.
Yeah.
And therefore India must become very competitive. And on the data side, we are quite clear that there's certain critical data of human beings, data relating to health, etc., which is very critical, which must be kept in India.
Yeah.
And those are critical data. And we've set up a national digital health mission, which will cover about 500 million Indians. And that data is critical to the human beings. And there is certain data which belongs to individuals. But a lot of data is not essential, which we should allow it to be utilized across the world. And therefore, innovation should not be stopped. Innovation is the key to the growth of the world. And without innovation, companies and world and the progress will get impacted in a big way. And therefore, there's a vast amount of commercial data, what we buy, what we sell. I buy a trouser, I buy a jacket. That data should be allowed to be utilized across the world. And therefore, the new privacy bill lays down the ground rules, which is a win-win situation for India, for Indians, as well as for innovation across the world.
But the argument being made is that this is a national resource, it's a national asset, and it should be used by Indians primarily, or first at least. And to create a level playing field to take on monopolies globally, is there, for instance, we've already got an equalization levy that is part of the budget that is now a reality. The world is talking about a digital tax. The point that I'm trying to make is, what do you see as the regulatory architecture going forward in the midst of this global conversation?
So the regulatory architecture is spelled out in the new policy framework. In the privacy bill, which has gone to the parliament, actually lays down a framework for the regulatory architecture. There is a complete regulatory body which has been spelled out. And that has been discussed and debated, and actually that, to my mind, will eventually lay down the clear ground rules for this. And that eventually will become one of the most important and key bodies in the regulatory framework for this.
Mm-hmm. Marcus Wallenberg, let me ask you about the experience in Sweden. Yesterday, the Prime Minister spoke about the threat of non-state actors, of cyber terrorism, Of course, there's a global debate on as far as ethics when it comes to AI and a code of conduct when it comes to AI algorithms. How has that been dealt with? How has that been addressed in Sweden as part of the collaborative ecosystem that you're working with?
So the basic form here in Europe, as you know, is the GDPR regulation, and that gives us certain limitations and the groundwork on how to work with all these questions. I mean, no question about it. The whole cyber discussion is not to be taken lightly. I think that for all businesses, this is no matter what actor you have on the other side of it, this is something that is clear and imminent for every business to try to find formulas to address that whole question. So I think we should not neglect that. I think the very big portion of that is not only technology but cooperation. Yes. Horizontally and vertically, because it's such a massive and very, very difficult subject matter that it should really be. On top of that, in our effort in the foundations, when we put this substantial research and educational package around AI in place, we also decided that we needed to take the whole question about ethics and relationship to the human aspect of AI into account. So actually, the researchers that we recruited to join us here in Sweden, some of them have a dedication towards exactly that, because there will be aspects of AI that we have to understand that they could not be so positive that we think it will be, and you have to address that at the same time. And that does not mean that AI should not come into space or place, but it should be addressed pretty early on so that you know and try to box in within what borders will you be allowed to use these technologies. And I think as we go along, AI will prove to open doors in such a way that we have not thought about today. Mm-hmm. And therefore, this whole, we call it AI HS, and we have to develop that in parallel. Very important.
Yes, put the safeguards in place. But Mr. Kant, let me ask you about AI in the context of e-governance. And, you gave us a list of the many missions that the government is working on, from health to, of course, Aadhaar, etc. But what next on the e-governance side? And more importantly, since you identified as part of that NITI Aayog discussion paper in 2018, the lack of a collaborative ecosystem, what role can the government play, should the government play, to create that ecosystem? Are you looking at funding startups? I mean, what is the vision there?
So, Shereen, I think the important thing to realize is that India has not been able to build platform companies. You have a lot of very dynamic startups, but you don't have platforms, and you need to create those basic platforms. We've been able to do it with Aadhaar, which is the biometric. We've been able to do it with Unified Payment Interface. But you may have humongous amount of data in India, but to clean data, annotate it, to make it data intelligent is a very, very tough job. And therefore, and to have the right computing power is very important. To have 150 to 200 petaflops of data through the national computing power, through the national knowledge network, which all IITs, etc. will use. And that is something which only the government, to my mind, only the government can do. And it's very much like the infrastructure creation, like we've done with UPI. With UPI, we created the Unified Payment Interface, on top of which you had Google Pay, you had Paytm, you had Phone Pay, you had Samsung Pay. All of them have created a business model on top of it. And therefore, India needs to create that basic infrastructure of data and lay down the platform companies across education, across health, across agriculture, on top of which individual companies can then innovate and create a very vibrant, dynamic ecosystem of innovation all along. But that basic platform has to be created in partnership by the government in partnership with the private sector. And therefore, this PPP play, the private-public partnership play, and the government acting as a very big facilitator and catalyst to create the public platform is really the key challenge for India right now. Because that will enable innovation to just boom.
No, but what are we talking about? Give me specifics when you talk about
See, you don't
a public platform. What are you speaking of exactly?
So you don't have, you see, the basic challenge is in agriculture, how do you may have a lot of data across India with all these soil cards, etc. But you don't have a platform company on top of which individual companies can come and innovate. And therefore, or look at the digital health mission. You have created digital health mission, but you want to create the basic platform company on top of which other companies can come and innovate. And that basic job of creating the platform company will not be an easy job for India. It can be done. It has been done by Google in America. It has been done by Microsoft. It has been done in China by several companies. But that someone needs to do in India, on top of which you can create many more apps.
So where are we in that process currently? I mean, and
I think it's happened, and it's happened, Shereen, in some areas like biometric. It's happened in
the future.
The next lot is happening in health, and I think the Diksha platform, which has done a lot of work in education, and we are working on the higher education side. We're doing a lot of work on the higher education side for an open university, completely open university, and I think the Ministry of Agriculture is working on creating the basic platform of the agriculture stack. So without these stacks getting created, it will be very difficult for further innovation to take place.
Okay, so speaking of future innovations, Marcus, let me talk to you about 5G. And while we're still awaiting 5G trials in India, the expectation was that would have happened by the end of the year. It looks like it's going to be pushed out. But how relevant will 5G be for India as a technology in the near term? What kind of use cases do you believe will make sense for a market like India?
I think that, when we've been talking about mobile communications earlier, we think about it in terms of text and voice and to a certain extent some moving pictures. I think 5G will open up, I would say, a highway of possible information sharing that has never been seen before, which means that we can probably move it into machine-to-machine transmission. So I think that those countries, primarily United States and China, that have perhaps are lying on the forefront. I think that they have thought about it to a certain extent in verticals, in saying that if you, for example, are in the financial industry, you will be able to bring so much more data, not only in terms of the banks and the financial institutions gathering data from, but also pushing out services into the mobile system. Amitabh talked about health. I think this is an extremely important question, especially for India, with your huge population in a huge country, where if you can actually use a broadband 5G network and you can apply and distribute a lot of the information that is needed, and also gather information on a very wide scale. This will help, if you take the health side, it will really help governments to be much more cost efficient in terms of applying certain pharma products to certain individuals depending on their specific need, as one example. But I think you will see vertical after vertical that will go industry vertical after industry vertical, who will actually use the 5G possibilities to their advantage. And if there's one of the things that I think about very much about competition, is to not fall behind in that particular question. Because if you are so much more efficient, because you can use a 5G technology coupled with algorithms and AI functions that can really help your customers or the doctors or whoever you're trying to apply it to in a much smarter way and a much more efficient way, you will fall behind if you're not up to snuff on this particular question. So there are a number of possibilities in the field of 5G. One other example I would mention to you is within industrial production, for example, where you actually can start using in connecting robotics, connecting your production flows into a much more mobile network going forward. So I think that when we put our thinking caps on and when we really start to imagine, I think the boundaries will open themselves to a much wider possible use case than we have today.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Kant, what is the plan as far as 5G is concerned? You know, Marcus gave us a sense of what we can imagine for the future. But one of the challenges and one of the constraints specifically in India at this point in time is the health of telecom services companies. And this requires a significant amount of capital. So what is the role, what is the plan, what's the blueprint that the government has in mind as far as the 5G rollout is concerned?
So let me speak as a member of the Digital Commission, and we are very clear that the only way India can grow at high rates is to technologically leapfrog, and that would really mean embracing both 5G and artificial intelligence. And let me tell you that whatever it may be about the telecom sector, we strongly feel that there are very strong players right now. I mean, the only reason why Reliance is in the top 10 companies of the world is simply because it's made such a radical transformation from being a petrochemical company to a tech and a digital company. And the only companies which will survive and grow and prosper in the coming years will be tech companies and who adopt to artificial intelligence. And my personal view is that we will go all out for 5G, but security will be a very, very major concern in 5G, and therefore, and cybersecurity will be a very, very critical concern there. And therefore, we would like, an evolution of a 5G ecosystem, which has friendly technologies to India. Particularly, Marcus, as we've interacted with Marcus as far as Ericsson is concerned, we've interacted with Nokia, and now Reliance has developed and evolved its own 5G technology from open sources, etc. And therefore, for us, right now, it's very important that 5G is opened out, it grows, prospers in India, but it grows with technologies which are very friendly to India.
You know, you spoke about technologies that are friendly to India. So there is still no official confirmation on whether China will be kept out of the 5G trials and the 5G auction. So is that now an inevitable decision, one that is just not being made public, but a decision that's been taken?
So we've allowed a number of companies to take tests in India, do their testing, and I think all leading players are there, including Chinese companies are there. So let them do the testing. The final word on this is still to be taken. But given the present security scenario of India, I think it's important that we work with players because 5G security will be a very, very critical player. It'll determine just about all aspects of communication. And for us, it's very important that eventually in any technology of this nature, national security will be a very major concern.
Okay, I would imagine it will be a very major concern, but you're saying that decision has still not been taken. But Marcus, let me ask you about potential opportunities for investors from Sweden here in India and what the future of collaboration looks like. There have been previous attempts at collaboration as well. You, of course, as I pointed out, have been looking at the Indian startup ecosystem as well as the Indian business landscape for a long time now. What's looking exciting to you? Where do you believe global investors would like to park their money?
Oh, I think that India has developed very nicely in the past years, and when I start seeing some of the capital raisings that I've heard about in India in the last, during this year, there has been a tremendous demand to come in to and be part of the Indian ecosystem. I think that, the sheer market size, the way geopolitics are going, the way you're thinking about future moves in the technology space, but also on how you can collaborate with Indian firms, I think there is a great opportunity here. In the case of our situation, I think that the companies that are already established in India is opening doors every day in trying to find collaboration. And you shouldn't underestimate, I think, your extremely strong position in the IT consultancy and the digital space already today. Yeah. So the big question is how will you tackle and develop that going forward? And I think it seems to me that there are a number of players of the platform companies and other businesses that are looking very, very seriously at opportunities in India.
Mm-hmm. From a manufacturing perspective as well, in the context of a supply chain rewiring that's underway, of a de-risking strategy that many global companies are looking at, where do you believe India finds its place in the pecking order today?
I think there is certainly the COVID situation, as it were, and also some geopolitical considerations have sent a message to businesses who are very internationally based that you have to think in multiple avenues forward. Those businesses that I have a contact with already have a presence in India. I have no reason to believe anything else than that they will continue to invest into India and see the possibilities going forward. But it seems to me that your positioning right now, which of course depends a lot, that the number of organizational, legal, and etc. Reformations that you have done in your country over the past years, that continues. That will have an important factor. That India stays open for trade is going to be a very important notion. So I hope those developments will continue in this direction as it is.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Kant, you want to respond to the point that we just heard there from Marcus Wallenberg, and I think that is, I know that you made an attempt earlier in your remarks to say that Atmanirbhar Bharat is not about isolating India from the world, but it is a deeper integration with the world. But there is confused messaging that seems to be going out, which does worry global investors. To Marcus's point that, the world wants to know whether India will continue to remain as open for business as it was. For instance, in the context of an import duty hike, and we've seen import duty hikes across the board on several items. What's the message that you want to send out?
So, Shereen, India is the only country in the world which has attracted $38 billion during the COVID period. And we will continue to open up. We've opened up our defense.
Largely into one company, sir.
No. You can't say this. I can name a whole range of areas. But we've opened up defense from 49 to 74. We've carried out reforms, radical reforms across agriculture, across MSME, across mining, across a whole range, education, a whole range of radical reform. Many of these reforms were pending from the time I was in school. It's taken us 5 decades, but radical reforms have been carried out. And the important thing for any country is that you must make yourself easy and simple. And that is what India has done. We've jumped up 79 positions. We've made the states compete. And our job will be to just make India simple and easy for investors to come in and create wealth in India and create wealth for themselves.
Okay, well, let me give both of you the closing comments then. And Marcus, let me start by asking you if there was a specific ask from Mr. Kant or for Mr. Kant, what would that be?
Stay as positive as he is.
That's not hard for him to do.
Well, I think that this whole sentiment on because I think Amitabh has a very clear vision of how important it is for India to be part of the global ecosystem when it comes to business, and there are so many things that go into that question, and so that's why I'm saying stay on the course.
Stay on the course. Mr. Kant, closing comments from you. What should we expect by way of priorities? Just to pick up from what the Prime Minister said in his address, he spoke about disaster management, he spoke about languages, and of course the larger issue of e-governance in the context of AI for all. If you can specifically give me the priorities that the government is now going to be sequencing.
So firstly, keep pushing for reforms. That's what the government has done, but reforms, and radical reforms, number one. Number two, keep using technology across sectors, education, health, agriculture. We can have reforms, but till we don't push for greater technology, you won't have increased productivity. And without increased productivity, you can't have greater growth. And therefore, the challenge will be in the coming years really to use both artificial intelligence, use your humongous amount of data, clean it, really use artificial intelligence in a very big way, and use the emerging areas of 5G technology, build your a whole range of new areas of growth, electric mobility, battery storage, get into the sunrise areas of growth and make India grow rapidly.
All right, Mr. Kant and Marcus Wallenberg, many thanks for joining us here on CNBC TV 18. We wish you both the very best of luck and look forward to hearing more from you on some of the issues that you've brought to bear this evening. Thanks very much for your time. With that, it is time for us to wrap up this CNBC TV 18 special from Race 2020 from all of us here for now. Many thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Bye.